Welcome to the Pastured Pig podcast, where we share the successes and challenges of raising pigs on pasture. We talk to producers all over the country, from small homesteads to large commercial pasture operations. Whether you're new to pastured pigs or have been raising hogs for decades, we hope you hear new ideas and new perspectives on pasturing hogs. Here's your host, Troy McClung.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Pastured Pig podcast. Excited to be back and be actually talking to other pig farmers across the country. We're kind of back in our interview phase again. I appreciate everyone sticking with us as we kind of progress through this strange time. But today I have with me on the podcast from Fervor Farm up in Hollis, Maine, Raychell Libby. And I had a really good conversation with Raychell. And we'll just jump right into it, and I'll catch you on the backside. It's my understanding that you are up in the beautiful state of Maine. I have really fallen in love with that state since visiting last year.
Yes,
so
it is awesome.
Tell us a little bit about your experience up there, kind of where you're at, what you're doing, and how you got where you are.
Awesome. Thanks. So I basically started by borrowing land from my family. I actually started right down the street from where I am, living in an RV with my partner and doing some farming on the side on my mother's land. So that was at the first time she started doing pigs. I would just buy one of them from her and then decided, like, this sounds really interesting. So I decided to do it on my own, and then I moved down the street to actually my father's land, which is much higher in elevation. We have a switchback driveway up to a really, really awesome view of the horizon. So loading pigs and driving them down that is obnoxious, but so we're staying here now. My father travels with work, and so now he has a really awesome forest up here, so of a lot of oaks. So we're going to try to create a silvopasture and move as many pigs as the land can sustain through the woods.
Oh, awesome. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's, a lot to unpack there. So whereabouts are you in Maine, and how's that kind of lay out with topography? You'd already mentioned some hills there. So what type of land are you talking?
So there's really, so we're in Hollis, which is in southern Maine. We're only about 45 minutes drive from Portland, which is my target market. And we're actually kind of like the only hill in the area. We're like living on like this big boulder or something. It's pretty low and pretty flat for the most part out here until obviously you get up to the whites. But yeah, so it's actually, we just happen to be in this really rocky, odd space.
Wow. So does that make for, you mentioned that it's your father's property where there's a lot of oaks, so it's primarily forested? Is it exposed rock? Is there any clear pasture? What are you dealing with there?
So it's kind of all of the above. So he was really into lawn. So there's this really nice lawn where we're going to try to do some rotational grazing with sheep. And then there's a lot of oaks, and then there are some exposed ledge, so basically it's the drive, the road is down below, and then you drive all the way up the hill there, and then we're kind of all sitting right up on top of the hill, pretty level up on top.
Yeah. Okay.
So there's some muddy areas here and there, but we've had a really, really dry spring so far, which has been odd. But so it's actually really, you can based on where you're going to be on the land, and you can kind of get what you need with what you got. You just might not be able to do it with a lot of animals.
Yeah. And how much land are you talking about that you have?
There's only 20 acres here.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it sounds like once you get on top of that ridge or that plateau, then it has a decent lay to it. So it's most of that 20 acres, I assume, is going to be usable.
Most of it, yeah. There's some spot down below where we have a nice working shop, so we can we got a car lift and everything down in there, so we can work on any machinery we need to. And then once you get up here, it's all basically the farm element. So there's a little log cabin, and then this awesome view with a really nice kind of grassy area right up to the view. So we're focusing on doing events and such up there. So I already do duck processing classes and some stuff like that up there. But yeah, but the pigs are all out back through the woods.
Okay. Well, you let's back up a little bit. You had mentioned something about kind of getting experience, kind of sticking your toe into the whole pig endeavor. Unpack that a little bit. What got you in? How long you been doing this? What kind of steered you this direction? Did you know straight out of the gate as a young adult that you wanted to be a pig farmer, or how did that evolve?
No, I didn't. I was interested in horticulture and went in that realm for a really long time, and I actually still work at a garden center to this day. My parents both had history in farming, but they didn't do any when I was young. So there's always been kind of a seed planted by learning about their backgrounds, but I didn't really get any hands-on stuff. And it wasn't until about I moved out, my mom got back into doing some pig raising. So when I noticed from her, it just kind of seemed neat to connect to back to the land and back to the food. I kind of scooted away to Portland as soon as I could legally do so, and lived there. And then that's such a foodie city now that I think I just learned a lot about food and just wanted to know more about where it came from. And so I was like, well, what better way than to just jump right into it? And once I started, I couldn't turn back. Pigs, I fell in love with pigs right off the gate. And then so I decided to do like chickens on the side and eggs, and then realized like that I had to do a little bit more to make a little bit more money. And so now I've got a lot going on.
Yeah.
But the focus for me is always been pigs. I think reluctantly going to start farrowing probably next spring, but yeah. You
mentioned that in your notes. We'll get into that in a second because I definitely want to discuss that. So are you so your father, it's your father's land. It sounds like he's on the road traveling a lot, but you mentioned your partner. Do you have any other help in this situation? Are you going at
not really. It's basically just us. We're both working full time. We're blessed enough to have work in businesses that are deemed essential under all of this. So I'm at garden center, which is under agricultural, and he's a head brewer at a brewery down the street. So it's basically just us. We have some neighbors that are lovely that will come help, like, pick things up and put them down when we need them. And we've been doing some work exchange days to get a little bit more help on like larger projects. So people just come out, do like 3 to 4 hours of work. We feed them lunch, give them like either, a pork chop or a dozen eggs or something to take home, and a free tour of the land. And
cool. Yeah.
That seems to work.
All right. So you mentioned your partner as a head brewer. That would be the kind of guy I'd like to hang out with. Let me get,
right? Yeah.
Does he happen to have a very large beard? Because most brewers that I've met all have very nice facial hair.
He does have a beard, but it's a modest beard. It's not ginormous. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I could never be a brewer. I can't grow a beard. So.
Right. He has a background in culinary too, so I'm spoiled, but also he's been able to teach me a lot about the different cuts, and communicating that with the butcher, and then that with the customers too, which has been very helpful.
Yeah, that is a great asset, and that we've talked about a little bit in the past when it comes to marketing and promoting your products, how it's so important to be able to communicate and to educate your customer base so they fully understand. I always tell the story of the guy that wanted an all bacon pig from me, and it's like, well, okay, we need to sit down and talk about this, because you're so disconnected from your food that you don't realize that bacon is not just something you wave over a pig and say, hey, it's all bacon.
Yeah.
So that's got to be that's a great asset to have, and it sounds like even with your all's employment opportunities there, that everything's nice and married together, and I'm sure probably one spills over into the other. Your horticultural experience at the garden center, yeah, excellent.
Yep.
All right.
Yep, and a lot of my customers are at the garden center because they're all kind of like Portland folk working at that garden center. So, and that's my target market, because you can get, twice the price for stuff just 45 minutes in, because they see the value of pastured pork more than people that actually live around the pastures for some reason.
Yep.
But
yeah, that's an interesting dynamic. You see that across. I'm sure you see that with everything that you do, with your ducks, your plants, your eggs. It seems like in the country, people are giving eggs away because everybody has chickens, and they don't appreciate it as much as when you get into these major urban areas. So.
Yep, I do have actually some kind of chef customers that are buying for their own personal consumption that have been educating me actually about some of the cuts, and wondering when I hand them the butcher sheet why they don't offer this and don't offer that, and can you talk to them about this. So it's been it's been a whirlwind learning from customers and then teaching other customers, and then yeah, it's a lot.
So how long have you been raising pigs to sell on the market?
So I would say 3 to 4 years
Okay.
now. I
Yeah.
think this is our fourth year of officially doing it with, our own money and our own work.
Gotcha. So you had mentioned earlier that you were reluctantly going to get into farrowing next year.
Yeah.
So first of all, why and why do you feel reluctant about that?
So I chose and fell in love with the Gloucestershire Old Spot breed. Originally buying them from Blue Tin Farm in Edgecombe, and I just fell in love with the breed. They're very docile. Their weight was nice for, the compromise to heritage time frame, so it was around 10 months. So I just fell in love with that particular breed, and then I found Blue Tin kind of backed off a little bit from raising them, and I found a farm like right down the road, 20-minute, not even a 20-minute drive, that was raising purebred Gloucesters. So I was like, you do all the raising and I'll just buy the piglets, because they have a slew of children that they homeschool, and it's like this really awesome little like network of a family farm, and they didn't have the time to do any marketing or selling of stuff. So they just wanted to do the piglets and then sell me the piglets. So we were just going to do that back and forth, but they had a boar issue this year.
Mm.
And they don't really know how long it's going to take to correct that. And then I went up and checked out other Gloucestershire Old Spots. We got was it Narrow Gauge and Orchard Pig Farms. They do Gloucestershire as well, and they didn't have any right at the right time. So I was like, oh man, maybe with all these scarce piglets coming around, I'm like, should I be doing this myself? So I have a uncut piglet coming next month who's like a heritage mutt, and I'm going to put that on the back burner and use him next spring, whenever he's old enough, if that's still an issue finding piglets. So
yeah. It's interesting time right now, obviously in the world, but specifically in our industry as well. There's all kinds of oddities happening when it comes to supply and demand of everything from processing equipment to the actual livestock. So yeah. So you may have to do your own farrowing on farm. That sounds like.
Yep.
Yeah, that's always a challenge, but there obviously are some rewards from that. Okay, so
yeah, we'll see.
I'm sorry. Yeah, exactly. Hopefully more rewards than challenges. So what about GOS really got your attention? What attracted you to them?
I think very first it was probably I read up on all the different breeds from Stories Guide to Raising Pigs, right? So I went through all that. I knew off the bat that I wanted to do some sort of heritage, and that seemed to me to be the best fit from description. Thinking back now, do I remember exactly why? I don't know, but I've come to love it because they're crazy docile. They are really good lard pigs. I like being able to have that extra benefit of soap making or rendering fat and selling the fat. And their meat is after the first I bet any breed, honestly, I probably would have fallen in love with the meat the first time. When you're doing it yourself, there's just such a connection.
Right. Yeah.
But that just happened to be the one that we fell in love with.
All right. Very good. So were those, had you mentioned that were those what you were raising out? Were they purebred GOS, or were they crossed with anything what you were actually?
So when we originally started kind of putting a foot in, my mother was getting random mutts, and then I brought in some purebred Gloucestershire Old Spots, and we compared the two, and the mutts definitely grew a lot faster, but I always felt like their meat was a little bit lighter pink and kind of bland flavor than the Old Spots. Mm-hmm. So now I have one purebred that I have pulled for hopefully breeding, and then I had to just buy in heritage mutts for the rest of them. So they do, the mutts that I'm bringing in, the mixed breeds, they do have a little bit of Old Spot in them, but not a ton.
Yeah. So are you seasonal in how you raise your pigs, I assume, being up in Maine?
Yeah, we did for the first time last year. We used to always buy in the spring, process in the fall. And then we, for the first time last year, bought some piglets in midsummer and then wintered them over and had them processed in May. The trick being, I can't move pigs when there's snow on the ground due to our driveway.
Yeah.
So I actually, it was a learning experience, but the pigs that I had processed in May, I probably could have had processed a month earlier, but I was nervous about the road conditions, and they were way too big. They were like 310 pounds hanging.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Oops.
Yeah, that's a little shock to a customer that's buying a whole and a half when they get that.
Yeah, they're like, hey, so I took a few cents, I think it was 25 cents off a pound hanging for them because of the oops, and yeah, but at the same time, the butcher charges me a little bit more when they're over 300 pounds.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, I've run into that. It kind of is what it is. You learn from that experience. So yeah,
Yep.
wow. So there's a lot of questions I want to ask you about that overwintering. So, how many did you overwinter in that batch?
Just 4.
Okay.
So that was good because it was just a low amount, and a low amount of water lugging throughout the winter.
Right.
Which was good, but yeah. So it wasn't too bad. We just had a nice pallet hut with plywood over the sides, and they were toasty all winter. We also had kind of a mild winter as well.
Yeah. Did you all get as much snow as you normally do this year?
No.
Yeah.
Nope.
I was thinking it was.
We didn't.
Yeah. So in that situation, obviously you get the benefit of frozen ground. When I think of overwintering pigs, I think of 2 feet of mud and all the issues, the sacrificial area that goes along with
Right.
it. But I assume in Maine, that's sacrificial area is not that big a deal since it's probably frozen solid. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Okay, so let's talk about your pasture setups a little bit. You talked about primarily wooded with oak up on this plateau. So how your pasture's laid out, how you're breaking them up, what's the rotational process that you're doing, and where's the evolution of that going?
Cool. So right now I just would basically go out and clear a space because we have coyotes in the area. I was nervous about the piglets, so we're doing the T-posts and welded wire, just like quickly thrown up, really just a physical barrier. And then we're just doing one strand of wire. So we're running that through the woods. And then that pasture we let, so the first time we were on this ground was about a year ago from now. So we probably had 11 pigs over the course of the last year in there rooting it up. So it's nice and rooted now. There's a lot of rocks and a lot of underbrush, so we're going back behind them and picking all that up. And then we're going to now we just have that one big sow and then the 3 piglets, and then we got 5 more coming next month. So we just going to move that whole thing kind of over. And we're basically just going to we're starting from scratch with the end goal of doing silvopasture, kind of have a horseshoe-shaped forested area anyway. So we're just going to kind of swing them around and bring them back. And hopefully by the time they're ready to go to processing, they'll be kind of back up front where we can load them again.
Very good. Very good. What type?
A lot of.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just saying a lot of moving debris and cleaning debris and then letting it rest. And I think it's going to have to be more disturbance than not for a little while, and then taking some trees down and figuring that out. You have a silvopasture going on your property, right?
Yeah. We're 100 acres of Appalachian hardwood and a very small amount that's actually what I would consider pasture, or we would call it a small meadow. But yeah, right now the pigs are in the woods and they're doing the same thing. They're churning. In fact, I was the other day I was cutting down some small beech trees that I wanted to open up the canopy to allow some other oaks to be able to proliferate more. And they were just going to town as soon as the canopies hit the ground. They were all over them. So they love those
awesome.
beech leaves. Yeah. So
do you have the end goal of doing grazing amongst just like the true silvopasture, or? Yeah,
the plan is the way our valley is oriented is a watershed that runs east-west. So I have a south-facing mountain or hill. It's funny, everyone always debates me whether I have a mountain or a hill. Flatlanders say I have a mountain. Mountain people say I have a hill. But so south-facing is an area that is all oaks. And, I mean, it literally is probably 40 acres of oaks. Beautiful, beautiful area. And I don't presently have the pigs anywhere on the south side, actually one little spot. But But on the north side, the side that faces north, the south ridge, north facing, is where we're doing a lot of work with the pigs right now, and just seeing how the pasture will come back once they get through. We have a lot of red clay, so we're seeing a lot of good disturbance. And my issue, of course, is that disturbance mixed with the fact that where you all are missing rain this spring, I think we've gotten it all. So we've been dealing with a little bit of erosion issues right now because we have a pretty good relief in our valley. So it becomes this cat and mouse game of how much disturbance do we have to let them clear this underbrush out versus too much disturbance then makes a lot of the
like hard packed with the rain.
Exactly, and the topsoil comes off the mountain and ends up down in the valley. So yeah, it's like you say, it's a dance. So we have to figure out exactly how that's going to work. So as you were talking, you're talking about so welded wire with single strand inside. Are you using that as a perimeter, or are you actually breaking up your paddocks with that?
So right now I just made like one big paddock, and then I'm gonna basically probably reuse that same material and scoot it back around. If that makes any sense. Yeah. So using that same back and then just kind of scooting it backwards is my goal, but we'll see the way the land moves around that. So.
Gotcha. Okay. Very good. So, when you're moving them through, do you have any additional infrastructure? So when it comes time for loading, are you just backing a trailer up to the edge of your pasture and luring them in? How much infrastructure?
Yeah. So unfortunately, I want to make a system like yours, but I had I dropped some pallets on T-posts, and then just like put plywood on and try to scoot them in. And it's just always a different battle, but that's a big goal of mine this year is like get it so that when they're ready to go, they'll be in this final pasture, and that will have, a setup kind of like you had the wooden kind of valley, right, to scoot them through?
Yeah, I have a little corral that's attached to our barn, so it's an opportunity to separate them into different groups and then push them
yeah, I think that's originally how I found you, Troy, was I was trying to look up best loading practices on YouTube, and you came up.
Yeah, I don't know if those were the best practice. Yeah, that was a exercise in futility in some of those videos, but yeah. No, it all comes with learning and learning your land. You're exactly right. The first year that I did this, because I had followed others. Obviously, we stand on the shoulders of one another. And I had followed somebody else that said, all we do is just back a livestock trailer up to the pasture, take the electric fence down, put the feed bowls in the trailer, they jump right in it, and it's off to the process. I'm like, well, okay, cool.
Are they joking? Is this April Fool's?
Right. I'm like, how hard could this be? And so, after losing my mind 3 days trying to get him in the trailer, it's like, okay, we got to do something different. So,
oh my God.
So my neighbor, who was a cattle guy, he came over, and he's like, of course, he's an old-fashioned dude. He was like, first of all, your pigs should not be on pasture. It's like, well, that's a whole different debate. I said, but imagine they're cows. How would you herd them up? And he's like, oh, here's what you do. So he spent an afternoon with me, and we built that corral, and it's worked great for years now.
Oh man, yeah. Last winter it was started snowing. The ground was already frozen on loading day, and we were worried about getting that trailer down that switchback steep driveway. And last minute, my mother was over, her husband was over, and it was me and my partner, and we were like sloshing through the mud on frozen ground trying to get these things and I was just like, this isn't going to happen. I'm going to have to call the butcher. We're going to have them over winter. They're going to be 500 pounds. And then randomly my mom's like, wait, my dad did say that you can always drop a 5-gallon bucket over a pig's head and back them up wherever you want to go.
Yeah.
And before she even finished her sentence, my partner Jay just jumped the fence, grabbed a 5-gallon bucket, threw it over a pig's head, grabbed his tail, and just with all of his might just threw him onto the trailer. And we all looked at each other like, let's get after it. So we got him on, but that was a mess.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I can remember the stressful elements. Well, I still get stressed out on loading day just because of the experience, but normally I find that loading day takes 10 minutes now, but I still am just so worked up the night before because it's you're playing the what if
PTSD.
Game. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the what if. What's going to happen? What if this falls over? What if this corral wall breaks? Yeah, stupid stuff. But Yeah, so that's
I got to get that set up better. I've also been figuring out, like, okay, I used to have a guy that would come over and load it, but his trailer's too big. He doesn't feel comfortable driving it up the driveway. So I'm like, okay, what amount of money can I justify paying just somebody just to come do this for me? Because when they can even come over in the summer, help me set up whatever they think's best for a loading. I can get it done, use their expertise, and I'll just pay them.
Yeah. So, do you have your own livestock trailer now? Are you borrowing one?
Yeah, we've got a little one that I share with my mom. It's like a little 2-horse trailer, and it's got a little ramp on it. But I swear, some people say that pigs do better running up ramps, and I don't know if it's the ears of the ones that I've had or if I've just had weird pigs, but they seem to hate the ramp because I don't know if their ears drops their eyesight down too far, where if they can't see what's up beyond that ramp, they're not about going in there.
Yeah.
So they'd rather step up into a trailer than walk up a ramp, I've noticed.
Interesting. Yeah, the thing that I learned that my neighbor taught me was small space to large space. So that's why we built the choke down that if you got 4 or 5 pigs in our little, what I call the triangle or the head gate, they're all kind of crammed in there and like this isn't comfortable, and as long as I've got their heads pointed toward that ramp, they look in that trailer and say, oh, that trailer's big and spacious. That's a bigger space, and I'm stressed out a little bit being in here with everybody else. So yeah, we go from a larger corral down to a gated area, then to this head gate, which, again, like I said, is triangular shape simply because we have to make a 90-degree turn with them because I run out of land. So that's how we get them in there, and they seem to be very eager. Once I got their head pointed, I just take a little stick and I just tap them on the rear end, and if their head's pointed in that direction, then they seem to just blast right up that gate and jump into the trailer. Of course, the feed bowl in there doesn't hurt either. So okay, interesting. So it sounds like there's a lot of similarities we have. Topography definitely it plays a part in your season and even how you manage your livestock. So with that, I assume having your partner who's a master brewer, do you get, when it comes to feed, do you get some benefit of the brewery there with some spent grain, or what do you feed now?
We did for a while, and it became so. At the time, we only had a few pigs, and they were like producing so much that that I couldn't really keep up. But honestly, like, I should probably just be spreading it somewhere. But I think for a while, one brewer that he worked with before that was like, oh, if you're just going to be throwing this in the woods, I'd rather give it to this other farmer that's feeding it to their animals. So they had, they wanted it to make sure it was, So we were taking it for a really long time. And then when I had to pause for a little bit, they found, I think it was like either a deer farmer or an random elk farmer that's taking it from them now. But when they scale up again, I'll probably start taking more again for sure.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, that's a great resource. So, what are you using instead in lieu of that?
Yeah, so you mean their feed?
Yeah.
So right now, when I only have a few, I've noticed the cost analysis is cheaper for me to drive down to my local agricultural feed store and buy pooling grain. And sometimes I cut that with 20% corn, depending on how the pasture forage is at the moment. But meaning that I don't feel as good cutting it with corn if I don't have a good pasture forage, because I feel like corn's just a cheap filler. And then otherwise, I would drive up to Augusta, which is our closest spot where you can just get grain dumped in the back of your truck, but that's like an hour and a half drive. So I had to do some cost analysis. It's a lot cheaper, because I think up there at the time it was like, I figured it out to be like $100 for 600 pounds of grain. And I don't think it was quite as good quality as the pooling. So. Yeah. So mostly grain. I haven't made the switch to non-GMO yet. I don't see the cost benefit knowing that they're on pasture and getting a lot of nutrients from that. I feel comfortable just still sticking with the generic.
Yeah, we're still using conventional feed at this time too. Same reason, cost analysis. And the fact that the pasture is supplementing more.
Exactly.
Okay. So looking ahead, Raychell, what you've talked about maybe having to farrow next year will be a forced goal to achieve. But what else? What's your short-term goals coming forward here with the farm?
Short term, definitely getting the pig pasture. The big silvo pasture is probably my number one goal. When that's finally done, it would just, for me, it's going to feel nice being able to just scoot pigs through the woods all the way over to when they can get loaded, and then chase different groups through so that we've got pastures, resting. I don't know the number of pigs that I can raise on here without disturbing too much. That'll be fun to learn. And then when we get that kind of maxed out, hopefully, I can supplement with other endeavors. I think we've got some sheep now, some Katahdins that we're now raising for meat. And we've got chickens, ducks, turkeys, and quail. And then I want to do a lot of like events and stuff and do some teaching and encouraging. There's a lot of Portland folk interested in getting back to the land and learn more about processing animals and stuff. So.
Yeah, and I think there's a major uptick in that right now due to our global event that...
oh, my God, yeah, absolutely. But now they're afraid to come out because they're like, well, I don't know how close I'm going to be to you. So I'm like, oh, so I got to get, like, some more tables up so we can set different duck processing stations and such so that we can social distance process ducks.
Yes, there you go. Yeah, they definitely have to walk that walk right now. But I think... Mm-hmm. I think there's definitely an uptick in people interested in at least knowing where their food comes, sourcing it to some degree, or at least sourcing it from a more reliable local source. The scarcity at Walmart has woken a lot of people up, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over the next year or so.
Yes.
Well, you admit...
I even have a vegetarian. Her boyfriend's not a vegetarian, so he's coming up to process a duck, but she's intrigued enough to actually come help. So.
Oh, wow. Interesting.
That'll be interesting.
That will be, yeah.
Yeah.
So I want to talk real quick about your processing or your sales. So I was looking on your website. So you sell wholes and halves, but you also sell individual cuts. So kind of talk about that a little bit, how the ratio, how that breaks out, what you're seeing more interest in.
So I've always been pushing the halves and halves, and then I randomly was like, oh, but if I can get, I'm kind of pushing against that fair market price for Portland price. So if I can get that amount of money for all these cuts, well, then maybe it makes more sense for me to sell through the cut. And so I would have a few done up just for, us, and then I'd have, cuts on the side. So I have to use a USDA inspected. We don't have a butcher around here who's just state inspected, oddly, but anyway. So I have to use a USDA guy for that. I found that I don't think depending on how much of the cuts I'm doing and how I'm selling them, it's actually more annoying to fulfill these orders and to drive them or meet somebody to do just this and this. So the effort and the marketing and everything put into pushing cuts has been, I think, more of an expense than I anticipated. So I think I'm going to continue pushing halves and wholes, and I'm usually sold out. So I request deposits before I even buy the piglets. I have the piglets spoken for before I fork over the money.
That's excellent.
I have deposits, and I've usually sell out by the time the piglets get to the farm.
Very good. Yeah, I think that's... You've touched up some things, conversations that my wife and I were just having this week about the very same thing. When you look at right now our wholes and halves, I usually try to do 50-50, sell 50% of our hogs wholes and halves, and the rest do as cuts, and kind of value add throughout the year. But doing these cost assessments, when you do individual cuts, that processing cost now falls on my shoulders, whereas where I'm selling wholes and halves, the processing cost falls on the customer's shoulder. So that, the inventory, the individual sales, we do a delivery schedule through kind of make our loop through town. So there's all this additional expense associated with it. Now, granted, you're getting a lot more. I'm selling $3.50, $4.50 a pound for whole and half. But when you can sell $8, $9 bacon and other things, it starts to work out. But in looking at the cost and the cost of time, it almost becomes a wash. And so you think,
and then figuring out what cuts sell better than others, and if you should just get that ground anyway, because it's easier to sell. Sometimes it's easier to sell a ground ham than it is to sell, that equivalent amount of ham steaks.
Yeah,
I've noticed.
Yeah, exactly. And it comes back to communicating with your customer base. I agree, because as we as we add new customers or people are just becoming familiar with Red Tool House, they're like, oh, wow, great. Man, I'd love to have, I want a ton of boneless pork chops. It's like, wow, yeah, I usually sell 10% boneless, and now I've got a guy that wants to get, what would be the equivalent of maybe 20 or 30%. It's like, do I make that processing adjustment next time to have more of that inventory? And all that becomes a bit of a gamble if somebody says, oh, I don't.
Yeah, and you're losing a little bit of weight on it too, right? So you're going to be selling it for less.
Yeah, exactly. So there's definitely that give, or the one guy that comes in and says, I want a whole pork belly intact because I want to process it on my own and do my own smoking. Yep. It's like, well, I don't have one of those laying around. So.
Right, so, exactly.
Yeah,
but can I sell you a half of a pig?
Exactly.
And you can then get that included.
Go nuts, exactly. Do what you want.
Yep.
Interesting.
If you're intrigued enough to process your own belly, then look at all these other cuts you can process on your own.
Exactly. Yeah, keep that smoker rolling.
Yep.
All right. Well, we talked about your short-term goals, and I'm kind of hopping around here a little bit, but what about long-term goals? Where do you see yourself 5-10 years down the road?
Oh, 5 years. So we're going to put up our own house on this property. So when my father finally decides that he's done traveling for work, because I'm sure that's going to get annoying soon, we can kind of both coexist on the land. He has been rejuvenated in the land, seeing what we've been doing with it. So I anticipate he'll be coming back, but he's good for doing a lot of construction and such. So I anticipate probably just hopefully not working a 9 to 5 anymore. Maybe working a little bit for supplement, but hopefully just being on farm, focusing on as much as I can and just value adding or doing classes or whatever, just to make that money roll in, at least 10 months, maybe 9 months out of the year, hopefully.
Excellent. So is your partner as engaged with the farming? I mean, does he see the same goal, or do you think he's going to be a full-time brewmaster?
I think he's always going to be brewing. I think he's very interested in supporting the farm, but I think it's going to be primarily driven by me. I would love to have the capabilities of having staff soon. That would be amazing. We still have that RV from when we lived down the street, so I thought it would be really cool to finish fixing that up, put the true composting toilet in it and such. We already have a little wood stove in there that's made for RVs and boats, and have somebody maybe even do like a work for stay and stay in that on the property, because it's beautiful up here, and I think that somebody might be interested in that. So
yeah, that would be great. Yeah, I think exploring these opportunities to value add or diversify income streams, revenue potential on the farm is huge. And again, with the digital age, as you see a lot, people are monetizing online instruction, the YouTube opportunities, those things. There's all kinds of different ways to help supplement the income of the farm and keep all those proverbial eggs from being in the same basket.
Right, exactly. Yeah, like I already jumped into the fancy Samani chicken breed, just like the all black chicken.
Oh, yeah.
Because there were people so interested in random breeds. So I got a little tiny coop with just a few of them in it, so I can sell their fertile eggs, which is a weird thing. I almost feel like it's a random niche thing to do, but I can always put those guys back in with the regular gen pop, I call it, of the coop and just go back to selling their eggs normal. It was a little investment, and I've already kind of made it back on them. So
yeah, great, awesome, good
little
deal.
Things, yep,
all that adds up for sure. Well, in typical fashion with interviews, I'll close out with the quintessential question here, existential maybe even. What is your best experience or favorite part about raising pigs on pasture?
I think it's definitely just being out there in the woods with the pig, and then hearing about people's connection to the meat and then coming to see it in person. Yesterday we were cleaning up and doing a work exchange out there, and there was a young girl she's not even 3 years old, and she could walk right up to our 400-pound sow and just scratch it on the nose, with me being right beside her just in case, of course. But I just found that to be it blew my mind. So I think, just being out there with the pigs and knowing that I'm doing everything I can to regenerate the land, using our community and helping our community at the same time.
Yeah, awesome. Good answer. Love that. Well, Raychell, if people want to find out more about your farm operation, where can they find you online?
I think I'm probably most active on Instagram at Fervor Farm. There is a website, and I do hope to update it more, but it's really mostly just for selling stuff to our local area. And it's Facebook, but realistically, Facebook hasn't been a great platform for me. So I guess Instagram is what I would say.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, I'll list the links to that in our show notes so people can check that out.
Sweet. And if any farmers are out there and want to give me advice, I'll listen.
Wonderful. Yes, that's what I like about that was the benefit of social media is the network allows people to ask questions back and forth. So
I've followed many people that were on your show just to ask them some questions and follow up on some things if they seemed like they'd be interested in that. And so I've made a lot of connections just from Pastured Pig podcast. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, great. That's great. That's the purpose of putting it together is to get everybody talking. So, all right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the podcast, and I pray you have a good season as things move forward.
Awesome. Thanks a bunch, Troy. You too.
All right. Take care. All right. Well, I appreciate Raychell coming on the podcast and spending some time to talk with me there. Check out her website and her Instagram. I'll link down below in the show notes so you can check those out. Again, if anybody would like to be on the podcast or know of a topic we should cover, feel free to send me a message. You can go to redtoolhouse.com, click on the Pastured Pig podcast link, and there's a way that you can contact me there, or just send me an email, Troy at redtoolhouse.com, and we'll get you scheduled and hopefully try to have some more exciting topics moving forward. Well, I pray everyone has a great week out in the pasture. Take care.
We hope you have enjoyed this episode of the Pastured Pig Podcast. To learn more about our podcast or to submit topics or recommend guests for future episodes, visit redtoolhouse.com.